Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 36 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I am Scott Coleman, and I am joined today by a very special guest who needs no introduction. You know him as the television play-by-play voice of the Atlanta Braves, Brandon Gaudin. Brandon, how are we today?
Doing well, Scott. Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. And just to tell you guys how cool Brandon is, we are recording this on Friday morning. He just called the doubleheader in St. Louis on Wednesday, travels to Chicago on Thursday for the snow game makeup, gets home late into Atlanta on Thursday night, and here he is on Friday morning. So thank you again, Brandon, for taking the time. I am sure the last couple of days have been a whirlwind for you. You've done a lot of cool things over your career, but I'm wondering if you have ever done 3 baseball games before in a stretch of about 24 hours.
Yeah, I have. I've used to do quite a few tournaments, Division III College World Series, where you do 4 games a day. And then I used to do a Big Ten tournament on the college side of things, where you would do 4, sometimes 5 games in a day.
Wow.
It was a little bit of a whirlwind. It's tougher on the players, right? I mean, for us, we get to travel with the team. We're blessed to be able to do that. And our role is a little bit easier and a little less of a grind. Sure, there is preparation, and when you got to switch teams out and kind of make sure your notes are refreshed on the other squad, there is some strain that goes to that. But all in all, as we like to say, it beats working for a living.
Yeah. Well, that is good to hear. I'm glad you made it back home in one piece. And Brandon, I just kind of we're going to talk some Braves a little bit later in the show, but I just kind of wanted to get an idea of how things were going for you. For folks who maybe don't know, you've had a really cool career to this point. The play-by-play voice for the Butler Bulldogs, and then locally with Georgia Tech. You were with the Big Ten Network. You've done NFL games. You've done radio with Westwood One. You're the voice of the Madden video game franchise, which was super cool for me. I mean, I grew up on those games. And now you're in year 2 with the Braves, your childhood team. How has the last year and a half been for you, both personally and professionally?
It's been fantastic. This is the team that I grew up cheering for, that I grew up idolizing in Evansville, Indiana. I was a TBS kid, and that's something I've talked about a lot. It's the biggest part of my story, because the Braves not only kind of brought me to like baseball, they brought me to like broadcasting. Skip Caray had the biggest influence, but certainly Joe Simpson, who it's so awesome that I've gotten to know him and get to sit in a booth next to him most nights, one of my childhood idols. And then Don Sutton and Pete Van Wieren. I mean, those 4 that I would listen to every night on TBS. That's really how I started to lock in on not only baseball but broadcasting. And watching those Braves teams through the 90s, that just made me fall in love with it. And you fast forward 3 decades later, and it's crazy to think that this opportunity would have presented itself last year. But when it did, and when I was living down the street in Atlanta, in Buckhead, I thought, well, if there was ever a team job, because at the time I was doing the games for Fox and Big Ten Network as a neutral announcer, and I thought if there was ever a team job that I would want, it would be the one with the Atlanta Braves. And so for that to open up, and for me to be fortunate enough to have the opportunity to get it, I've said it many times. It may be cliche, but it's true. It's a dream come true.
So I did want to ask, so when the job opened up a couple of years ago, was there any doubt in your mind, or was that one where you got together and said, you know what, no, this is something I really want to do?
Oh, I knew it was something that I wanted to go after right away. I never thought it would open up. I thought Chip would just be here forever, and I had listened to Chip and enjoyed listening to Chip just like I did his father. I mean, so the Careys collectively have had such a huge influence on me. And following the Braves as a fan while living in Atlanta, I just didn't expect for that job to ever open. So I didn't really, it never crossed my mind as a possibility. I didn't really let it entertain the thought. And then when I got word that it was going to open, it all happened really, really quick. From the time that I found out it was opening to the time where they had called and offered me the position, if I'm remembering correctly, it was only about 7 days, maybe 10. So everything happened really quick. It was almost like you didn't even have a chance to comprehend what all was going on. And then I think once the season started last year, that's when it really settled in. That first road trip, and then especially the first game at Truist Park, first time I sat in that chair, put that headset on, and looked down and got ready to call that game last year against the Padres. I think that's really when all the emotions kind of hit me in a good way. In a good way. It was something again that I was incredibly thankful for and still am. But in that moment, you flash back to all those days as a kid watching the games on TBS and hoping one day to have an opportunity like that. And then all of a sudden you're there, and it almost felt like a dream, and a dream that I'm still living out.
Well, I can say this, and I don't say it because you're on the podcast today, but you do a fantastic job in the booth. And I think I speak for Braves fans everywhere. You keep the broadcast fun, you keep them informative, which is something that I know I appreciate. This is a show that kind of leans towards more of a stat slanted and analytical approach. And I know that's something that has been a great addition to the booth. I wanted to bring up a story that you've shared, I'm sure, many times, and maybe our listeners remember it when you took the job, but just a great story that involves the legendary Skip Caray. You wrote him a great letter that Skip responded to, I believe, when you were 13 years old. And in some ways, it kind of inspired you and launched your career. When you think about Skip Caray and that memory, what comes to mind?
Yeah, I've got that letter sitting about 5 feet from me. I keep it in the drawer of my desk here in my office. And I remember writing that letter. I can't say that I specifically remember everything I said until I go back and obviously read it. But I remember sitting down in the family room on the table with a pencil there, and had took out two pieces of paper from one of those stencil notebooks, that had the shredding on the side, and
Oh, yeah.
wrote that letter to Skip. And I remember putting it in the mail and thinking, I don't know if I'll ever hear back, but I knew I wanted to express to him how much I enjoyed watching the Braves telecast because of him, and how he had inspired me even at that young age at 13 to try to get into the business. And I'll always remember checking the mail every day after school. And it took a little while, but I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks later that one day when I checked the mailbox and there was a letter, and the letterhead in return said Turner Broadcasting. And your heart kind of skipped a beat. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. He wrote me back. And he didn't say anything earth shattering in there. It was advice that a lot of broadcasters would give to young aspiring broadcasters about making sure you study the game and listen to yourself and critique yourself and just get as many reps as you can, all the obvious things. But the fact that he took the time to write it kind of made him, in my mind, he was a bigger than life thing. It's almost like he wasn't real. He's just a guy that as a kid I saw on television. So that letter kind of made him real and tangible to me. And in a weird way at 13, that kind of helped drive me even harder to want to do what he was doing. And so that letter did have a profound impact. It still does. Obviously, as I said, I still hold on to that near and dear. But yeah, I mean, I could go on and on about Skip. A lot of the things that I sometimes find myself saying in the middle of a broadcast are things that just naturally I heard him say when I was a kid. And so I incorporate those little nuances into my call, as Chip did too. You kind of become a product of what you grow up around and grow up listening to. And for me, that was Skip. And so, yeah, his thumbprint, if you will, is I feel all over my broadcasts on a daily basis.
And a question that I wanted to ask you, Brandon, from a play-by-play perspective and someone who is kind of steering the boat when you're in the booth. Last season, you and Jeff Francoeur had this great chemistry right away. It was like you were old high school buddies calling a game. And now you're with CJ, who, I mean, I've noticed brings a ton of stat-driven analysis and analytics into the booth. And then you'll do a broadcast with a Hall of Famer like Tom Glavine with 300 plus wins and just a wealth of baseball experience under his belt. Does that change anything for you in a play-by-play sense and how you approach the game that night?
Yeah, it does. It doesn't really change how I'm actually calling the plays. It changes how you host, if you will, because each person has different things that they like to go to, right? Each of those guys has different things that they find, I would say, more in their comfort level. And so knowing that and trying to set them up in those spots I think is important. But also the easy thing with all of them is my job is to let the game breathe, right? And so I try to always remember this game is on television. You don't have to call every pitch. You don't have to say everything. I can say lifted to center field, caught, whereas on radio, if you do that, you're saying that swung, it's out to mid-range center field. He gets camps underneath it and he pulls it in for the second out. You don't have to do all that on TV. And I guess my point in saying that is if you kind of give the game time to breathe, it also gives your analysts more space to jump in. And that's what I want to do. I always tell every analyst I work with, I just want to make sure I'm leaving you the space to break down the game because they are the experts. They are the ones who are giving the people at home the insight into the X's and O's, if you will, and breaking down the game. You know, my job, I see it as adding stories, adding human interest elements, being there when big plays happen to kind of put that extra exclamation mark on it, if you will. But the analyst is there to really teach the viewer. And I want to give them the space to do that. And that's always a goal. But look, and I'm not just saying this, those three guys are tremendous at what they do. And while they may have little differences, they all have such good strengths that to me, they're all such enjoyable listens. And I like I say challenge, it's not a challenge. I enjoy the difference in working with each of them. Kind of keeps you on your toes and it's fun. Like tonight's with Glab, and I haven't worked with him in a few weeks, but I know it's going to feel like riding a bike. It just all those guys make my job very easy.
Well, we as fans are in very good hands, no matter who is in the booth every night. It really is an enjoyable broadcast, and that's a tip of the cap to you. We are going to keep talking a little more with Brandon, but first, a quick word from our sponsors. SeatGeek is the official ticketing marketplace of Major League Baseball. They have you covered for all of your baseball ticket needs with more than 28 million downloads and the #1 rated ticketing app. There are more than 70,000 events listed at SeatGeek, including concerts, sports, festivals, theater events, and much more. Baseball season is in full swing, and you do not want to miss out on any of the action. They have your tickets to every single game on SeatGeek, and that, of course, includes the Braves, whether they're at home in Atlanta or on the road. I've used SeatGeek in the past for Braves tickets, and the experience could not have been better. They put all the tickets across the web in one place to make sure that you were getting the best possible deal every single time. Each ticket is rated on a scale of 1 to 10 at SeatGeek, so keep an eye out for those green dots as well as the best values to steer you in the right direction. Every ticket at SeatGeek is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. We have a pretty great promotion for you guys where you can use our code HAMMER for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek. Again, $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek with promo code HAMMER. Make sure you click the link in our podcast description to download the SeatGeek app today. And one more time, promo code HAMMER for $20 off your first purchase at SeatGeek.
Eric Kratz here from FT. I'm a former athlete that really pays attention to his routine. And AG1 every morning before my workouts is something that gets my day going.
Hey, Braun here. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers daily nutrients and gut health support, and it's backed by multiple research studies so you can trust what you're putting in your body.
Unlike other products which only test their ingredients in isolation, AG1 tests their formula as a whole.
Ready for this stat? 97% of people in a research study felt more energy after 30 days of drinking AG1. If I had to recommend one product to support whole body health, it's AG1, and that's why FT is excited to have them as a new partner. Starting your journey with AG1 is a win. Try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D3, K2, and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase at drinkag1.com/foul. That's drinkag1.com/FOUL. Go check it out, FT fam.
All right, Brandon, I always like to ask this questions of folks who get to travel with the team regularly and get to go all over the place. From your travels, are there any favorite ballparks or cities? I am sure you are probably quickly on your way towards checking off all 30 stadiums across the league.
Yeah, I'm getting close. I think I've got the Twins and Angels, and I believe that may be it. But There are really no bad trips, as I'm learning. It's just kind of which ones are your favorite trips. I really enjoy going to New York. And I will say that because it's New York. It's a fun city. All the guys usually take their wives and their families, and you get to walk around Manhattan and have some fun. And then, this most recent trip, there's history. Even though it's a new Yankee Stadium, it's still Yankee Stadium, and there's some history and fun with that. So that's always an enjoyable trip. I like Denver, even though the Rockies may be struggling and their crowds aren't great. It is beautiful. The weather this time of year is typically fantastic. You get that cool mountain air and the view, and then there's just iconic baseball cities, right? Wrigley Field, even St. Louis, which is such an iconic baseball town in my mind, and I grew up a couple hours from there. Like, I appreciate so many different things about these places. That again, there are no bad trips, but those are a few that are at the top of my list. And then the other one I would say, from a ballpark perspective, is Fenway. I mean, look, the history and everything, it's obvious. It's usually everybody's either 1, 2, or 3 on the list. But calling a game there, the views, you think about the people that have played there, walking through the tunnel and thinking of the legends that have walked through that tunnel in the visiting clubhouse to get onto the field, you kind of get chills. And then the booth there in particular, you are right on top of the action. It is the most unique vantage point as a broadcaster that you get in Major League Baseball, and it just feels like you have stepped back in time. And it's just a really awesome place to visit and to call a game. So that certainly is up there as well.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. I've been able to get up to Fenway a couple of times, and if listeners have never been to that ballpark, I cannot recommend it enough, and it sounds like you would as well. Just cool to even just sit in one of the seats out in the bleachers and think, who else has sat in this chair over the last
Yep.
100 plus years? It really is a special place. Um, Brandon, I wanted to ask and get your take on this year's Braves team. You get to see these guys up close more than, I mean, basically everybody. And, I think it's fair to say it's been a little bit of a roller coaster at times. There's been some highs, there's been some lows. There have been a lot of injuries that they have to overcome. Kind of where do you see this point as we reach the midway point?
I obviously see what everybody else sees as far as the offense. Things started good, right? 18-6, looked a lot like 2023. Bats go cold, some frustration. And then the bats heated up there for a week and a half. And now on this last road trip, they kind of cooled off a little. So I want to see what happens on this homestand. I think it's an incredibly pivotal homestand. You're hitting the midway point in the season. You end it with the Phillies coming to town, and it kind of sets the tone for the All-Star break. So I really want to see what happens during this home stretch. But look, the Braves, I think we have to keep in mind that they have overcome a lot. You lose a potential Cy Young winner and arguably the best player in baseball in Acuna, and that's a pretty big 1-2 punch. And I know the Braves are stacked and fans expect a lot, but that's hard to deal with. And then you throw in the other injuries that have happened to Murphy, to Riley, now to Michael Harris. It seems like the Braves, everyone deals with injuries throughout the course of a 162 game season. No one's going to feel sorry for the Braves, but they have been a little snake bit here. But I will say this, because of where the National League is at, the Braves right now are comfortably the top team for the wild card spot. And it's early, right? So while the division and the trailing the Phillies by a wide margin does not look good right now, I guess what I feel good about is the fact that the Braves have 3 starters that are pitching as well as anybody in baseball. And as long as those guys can stay healthy, and I know that's an if, but if those guys stay healthy, as long as the Braves can get into the postseason, I still really like their chances, and I will take the Braves against anybody. Would you like the bats to show more consistency? Well, sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that the bats will. I think, last year was a historically good offense. This year, the offense at times has been underperforming, but the expected numbers have been better than what has actually happened. And so you hope that at some point Scott Water finds its level, and the truth is somewhere in the middle. But if the team is pitching as well as the team has been, the bats don't have to do what they did in 2023. They just need to be average. And I think this is a far above average offensive team that unfortunately has just underperformed a little. But I expect them fully to turn this around. And again, it's important to keep in mind we're not to the halfway point yet, or maybe when people are listening to this, we are exactly at the halfway point of the season. So there's just so much baseball left to be played.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned how good the pitching has been. Chris Sale, what more can we say about this guy? He was fantastic on Thursday in Chicago. Should have gotten him the win. It's a bummer the Braves couldn't scratch across a couple of runs. But seeing Chris Sale every 5 or 6 days, I mean, he has been as good as anyone in baseball. And it feels like he has kind of turned back the clock a decade to the level he was pitching at years ago. I mean, how impressive has he been, and what's it been like being around Chris?
Yeah, and he's tremendous, as we talked about often during the broadcasts in the clubhouse. He's a guy that people gravitate towards, and he gives you that, I don't know if you want to say extra boost of energy in the clubhouse or fire. Maybe fire is the better word because he is a fiery guy. And I think that that's something that was welcomed in the clubhouse. But he's also a guy that is frequently smiling when he's not on the mound and is coming around and talking to everybody. Everybody likes him. And you see him on the team playing and in the hotels, and he's just kind of in different conversations and checking in on people. And a guy that's been around that long, that's won that many games, that's been to that many all-star games, yeah, that's respected. That is instantly respected. And the fact that, so even if he wasn't performing well on the mound, I think it's a good addition and somebody that the Braves can just lean on in the clubhouse. The fact that he's having the all-star campaign that he's having is the cherry on top. And look, it's the first offseason that he's been healthy in about 6 years. And I think he's seeing the fruits of that. And I do think he feels younger. He feels rejuvenated. He looks like he's pitching like a 25-year-old with a very fresh arm. And it's been an incredible pickup. Between he and Reynaldo Lopez, you potentially, to me, those guys are both all-stars. Like if they're not in Texas next month, I would be surprised. But even if they aren't, or for some reason they get left out unfairly, they're having all-star caliber campaigns. And that's been so nice to see for this Braves arsenal.
Yeah, two just fantastic additions by Alex and his team. Where would the Braves be at if they didn't strike gold with Chris Sale and Ronaldo Lopez? And we also have a really great pitching matchup on Saturday afternoon against the Pirates. Brandon, you've seen a lot of baseball this year. I don't know, other than opening day when it was Wheeler against Strider, I don't know if we have had a better pitching matchup than Paul Skeens, who is pitching at an unbelievable level, just a year removed from the #1 pick in the draft, and Max Fried, who has been as good as anyone in the game the last couple of months. It should be a really great matchup on Saturday afternoon. Do games like that give you just a little more juice, knowing that you have two of the best in the game going?
Oh, yeah, there'll be more juice in the ballpark. I think it would be silly to ignore that because Skeens has kind of, he's kind of doing what Ohtani has done over the last couple of years, and that when he starts, people stop and they want to know what happened. And there have been times when Ohtani's going when people want to check in and see what he did. And that's kind of what Skeens is doing. He's the young superstar pitcher still, as you mentioned, so close to just being drafted, 22 years old, and he's throwing the ball routinely over 100 with nasty stuff. So I think it's also a good opportunity for Max. Like I feel like Max Fried is an underappreciated superstar in the game of baseball. Braves fans know and appreciate and respect him, but I feel like you don't hear his name enough in other circles. Max is an unbelievable pitcher, and he's having a fantastic season. And so it may sound silly to say that he deserves that stage but he does. He does deserve that stage. And I hope that for all the talk that's going to happen about Skeens on Saturday, I hope that there's as much talk about Max after that game. And I just really hope that Max performs well and can outduel Skeens because Max is tremendous. We know the track record when he's healthy and what he's been able to do this year as well. But yeah, look, that's of the 3 games, that one's got the extra juice, and that's going to be incredibly fun to watch and to broadcast.
It should be good indeed. And Sunday, we have an early game For me out on the West Coast, it is an 8:35 a.m. first pitch, which will be a fun time. But 11:35 locally. And Brandon, you are going to be in the booth, I believe, with CJ on Roku. So Sunday morning's game on Roku. Anything special or unique about that other than just where it's being broadcast, or is that kind of business as usual for you?
No, it's not business as usual. It's much different. So it is actually Matt Capps, who is the Pittsburgh Pirates TV analyst, that is going to be the analyst. So Roku started this package, gosh, now 6 or 7 weeks ago. And what they've been doing is, rather than bringing in quote unquote national announcers who don't see the teams every day, they have been taking the home play-by-play announcer, me in this case, and the visiting analyst, Matt Capps in this case, and pairing them together so that you have a local broadcast, but split 50-50 as far as knowledge of each team. I think it's a really innovative, cool thing that they're trying. I think this platform is the right way to do it and to try it. And they've gotten, from what I understand, good feedback on it. So what will be different is, obviously you won't hear two Braves announcers. You will have Wiley Ballard on the sideline. They're doing the home sideline reporter, so that's cool. But my call will have to be a little bit more neutral. And I'm sure some people will not understand and probably be angry at that. But that's, I've worked a lot of games in that role, being a neutral announcer. So it will be different. I will not be able to show a Braves bias. I will need to get excited for both teams. And so certainly that will be a different feel. But I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a different challenge. And Matt Capps, I've heard him on Pirates broadcast. He's a tremendous guy, actually lives in Atlanta. And so that's a thing I'm looking forward to on Sunday. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
That does sound like a really great idea to kind of merge two booths into one. So again, you can check out Brandon on Roku Sunday morning, 11:35 a.m. first pitch. Brandon, I sadly need to let you go. You have got a baseball game to call tonight. I speak for Braves fans everywhere that we are thrilled to have you in the booth. You and the team do a fantastic job. And I just want to thank you again for everything that you do for the team, and also for just taking some time on your very busy week to come on to the show today.
Scott, man, glad to do it. This job and things like this are a privilege, and I'm just fortunate to be able to work with this organization. And so hopefully these bats can get going. But remember, even if they are still struggling a little bit right now, this team's in a good spot. And I hope that this season, by the end of it, we're all planning a long postseason run. Would love nothing more than seeing that. So thanks for having me, man. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Please come on back anytime. Seriously, we would love to have you again. He is Brandon Gaudin, play-by-play voice for the Atlanta Braves. Brad and I will be back in our usual time slot on Sunday night, so be sure to keep an eye out for that. Have a great weekend, everybody. We will see you all next time.